Hello and welcome. I'm Joy Williamson-Lott, Dean of the University of Washington Graduate School, home of the Office of Public Lectures. I want to thank you for joining us for our graduate school public lecture titled How Music Connects Us, Belonging, Wellbeing, and Sonic Lineage. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Meany Center for the Performing Arts, the Population Health Initiative, our talented live stream production team, and graduate school staff who helped make this live stream possible. Thank you. I also want to thank you for your continued loyalty as viewers of these great live streams. We know it's not the same experience as what our in-person lectures offered. One day, we will get to see one another in person, and I know our team in the Office of Public Lectures is really looking forward to seeing you too. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our speaker, Meklit Hadero. Meklit Hadero is an Ethio-American vocalist, songwriter, composer, and cultural activist, making music that sways between culture and continents. Known for her electric stage presence and innovative take on Ethio jazz, Hadero is Chief of Program at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, as well as a National Geographic Explorer, a TED Senior Fellow, and a Mellon Creative Fellow at the University of Washington. Hadero has received musical commissions from Lincoln Center, the Creative Work Fund, the MAP Fund, and the Center for Cultural Innovation. She is a featured singer in the UN Women theme song, as well as a co-founder of the Nile Project, and a former artist in residence at Harvard, NYU, and Purdue. Her last album, When the People Move, the Music Moves Too, reached number 4 on the iTunes World Charts, and her music has been featured in the New York Times, NPR, CNN, the BBC, and many, many more. She holds a BA in Political Science from Yale University. Thank you for joining us tonight, and enjoy the lecture.
Hey everyone, good evening. It is such a pleasure to share some time with you on this Thursday evening. I thought I'd start with a song to set us off. You know, in a lot of my music, I'm thinking about the question, where did you come from? But to me, there's lots of ways we can answer that question. Sure, yes. Maybe one day I want to answer from the level of my family. And on another day, maybe I want to answer from the level of my city or country. But maybe another time I want to go back further back. Maybe we can go all the way back to the atoms that make up our bodies. What if we went all that way back to a star that built us? Yes, this is a fable. The star was hungry, and the star's belly was made of hydrogen. And as it ate the hydrogen became helium, and the helium became lithium, and the star got heavier all the while. Heavier and heavier she got, heavier and heavier she got, until that heaviness led to lead. And the star couldn't hold that lead. That lead was too heavy for her to hold. And out she exploded as a supernova that seeded other galaxies and solar systems, including ours, including every single thing we see. That's how we were built. That's part of how we were built. And so when you look at anybody else on this earth, or any tree or any rock, you say, oh yeah, where did you come from? Well, there are 1,000 supernovas that made up this earth, that made up the material that make this earth. And so if you are ever feeling ordinary, remember there is nothing ordinary about about you at all. Where did you come from? Where did you grow those bones? Midnight is nearer. Look up, your reflection, how it falls. Oh, 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 pieces collected from debris left behind. Gravity possessing me. Electromagnetic mind. Remember when you would fly without wings? How you loved to feel that falling across the universe on a string and start over. Everything that we are was made in a supernova. Everything that we are was made in a supernova. Cause everything we are was made in a supernova. Everything we are was made in a supernova. Oh, in me is stardust is living 1 billion years gone by. So who is going to stop me when it's my time to fly? No ordinary girl. And you, a cosmic sailor with an appetite for Earth. We wrap ourselves in this life. We're showered down and settled from our home in the skies. So watch out, jump back and get down. The nebula is rumbling. You better start running. You better start running. An explosion is coming. Everything that we are was made in a supernova. Everything. Everything we are was made in a supernova. Everything we are was made in a supernova. Where did you come from? 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 Whoa, 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 Sometimes it's easier to put it in a song, but other times it's important to talk about it, how music connects us, because it's so important. And so what I thought I would do, after singing this song for you all, was for us to have a participatory moment. Because here I am in my studio, I'm surrounded by instruments and drums and cymbals and shakers and headphones. And somehow the studio resonates back, like all the rehearsals that have happened in here, they're still kept inside the walls somehow, right? Like it's all held. But since we're not together, I thought we could just do this little visualization exercise together to put us in the same place in ourselves and in the memories that I want us to call up. So here's what I want you to do. And just go with it, y'all. I want each of you to close your eyes for just a moment and take a deep breath maybe 2, maybe 3. Let's reflect for just a moment on a time when a music experience brought you into a profound, supportive connection with a group of people. A memory, call it up, a profound, supportive connection with a group of people. It may be from long ago, or maybe from not so long ago. It may be from a dinner table or a concert hall. I mean, really put yourself in that place. Choose a memory. See where you are, really see it. Are your eyes closed? Remember, got to close your eyes for this one. And let's go into our senses for just a minute. Are you in this memory? Reflect. Are you outside? Is the sun shining on you? Are the clouds sheltering you? Or are you inside? Are the lights shining bright and colorful in reds and greens and purples? Or is the room dim? Hear the sounds in your mind. What is the music like in that memory of music connecting you to others? What were the rhythms like? Were they danceable and pulsing? Or were they slow, more like a sway? Was the melody soaring, or was it light and kind of breezy? In that space, in that memory, feel your feet. Like, feel into your feet. Feel into your legs and your hips and your arms and your heart and your face. In that space, is your jaw unclenched? Do you find yourself smiling? See that space you're in, that space of joy and sensing into a wholeness. So I invite us all to open our eyes now and just reflect for a moment on what you felt. Who were the artists? Have you listened to them lately? Maybe you should listen to them again. But I wanted to start with this exercise to remind us that we viscerally know the connective power of music. We carry it with us. And these experiences can be a source of strength and well-being. We can experience that well-being like a cascade, returning to us when we need it. I mean, here we are in the pandemic. It's an incredibly difficult time for artists because we can't perform in person. You know, we can't perform in person, this healing function that is literally the underpinning of our identity, but we will be back out there, good people. And when the restrictions lift and when the pandemic is far gone in the rearview mirror, we will need the artists and the musicians more than ever. Maybe that's part of why you're here today. Maybe you love music and maybe you know there's more to the story. Well, there is. And I want to talk about some of the ways that music tells a bigger story about who we are. You know, a lot of times people think of me, you know, I'm Ethiopian. I grew up in the States. I make Ethio jazz music, music inspired by Ethiopian music and by singer-songwriter music and by jazz. But I'm often put in a category of world music. You know, the term world music is often one of division, or it can be, where we look at places and cultures that are unfamiliar to us, and the word can other them. But I prefer to think of world music differently. And here it is. Every single culture in the world has music. Every single culture in the world has music. All music is world music. That's how I like to think of it. I like to let that phrase kind of like live with this open-armed sense of curiosity, of listening, and always a space to learn more and know more about other folks' interpretation of this gift of life that music is, that it ties us together as a species. So what happens when we actually hear music? What is going on in our brain when we hear music? And, you know, yes, I'm a singer-songwriter. Yes, I'm a cultural activist. Yes, I organize projects and initiatives in culture. And but at the same time, I come from parents who are both scientists. And though that was not the direction that I went in, they did give me a big gift by letting me into a love of science. And neuroscience in particular has a lot of incredibly fascinating pieces of the music puzzle to contribute. And so I want to share a series of studies that have been really enlightening and illuminating for me, that have helped me engage with and start to explore my way into music in whole new ways. So the first one I want to share is a small study that happened at MIT. And this is really, really profoundly beautiful. The researchers looked at a series of participants and had them listen to over 150 sounds of all kinds. So all kinds, music and not music. They were listening to over 150 sounds. Some of them were music, some of them were not music. And they hooked up the participants to an fMRI machine while they were doing this listening. And then they did some algorithmic analysis of the data that came from the study. And what they found was there is a set of neural clusters. There's 6 sets of neural clusters that process sound, but there's one set of neural clusters that only lit up exclusively for music and for no other types of sound. And it didn't matter the style. It was like whether it was pop or bluegrass or rap, whatever it was, when music was there, this set of neural clusters lit up. And what that means, what I think it means, and what the researchers think it means, and of course, all of this stuff has long, long, long ways to go in terms of, just elaborating these studies. But what the researchers think it means is that we have wiring for music, that we are hardwired for music. And I think that means that while music is culture, it's also bigger than culture. It's us. It's us. It's literally who we are. Listening to music and playing music together it's been really well documented in like many studies that it's linked to changes in your neurotransmitters in the brain, in particular dopamine. It has an effect on your tolerance for pain, as well as your sense of closeness and connection to others. But even more interesting, or like one step more interesting, is that it's not just about how music is us as a species, but also it starts to get really interesting when we think about how music functions socially. So often we hear folks using language like music brings us together, but some of these researchers are answering the question how does it do that? So there was a study published in the Journal of Cognitive Science, and a team of researchers showed that after people listen to rhythmic music together, they actually perform coordinated tasks better than control groups. So in other words, music makes people better at working together. Coordinated tasks that require a lot of physical interaction, people moved better together. And in particular, it worked by making others made them better at sensing what was happening with another person. It literally attuned people to each other, pun intended. I feel like this is also a traditional knowledge. Like, we understand this. We've understood this for like eons and millennia, and now science is catching up to that. Just last week, UCSF and the Kennedy Center launched the Sound Health Network to promote research and awareness about the impact of music on health and wellness. They have this like really beautiful clearinghouse of studies about music and wellness that you can just like dive into. And I've been, it's only launched about a week ago, but I've already spent a ton of time on this website. And their particularly interesting study was showing how when you sing with your children, how much that promotes bonding between parents and their children. And as the mother of a 1.5-year-old, that really stuck out to me as something beautiful. And we sing together all the time. And the last study I want to mention before I move on to talking about personal stories is one from Sweden, which showed that when folks sing together, their heartbeats pretty quickly sync up. their heartbeats start to beat together. And it's been well documented. When they sing together, they start to breathe together, because the singing implies breathing, like the lyrics tell you when to stop, when to breathe, when to take a breath. And when you breathe together, your hearts start to link up. And so choirs, when it sounds like they're one entity, well, they are at more than one level. And I have lots of questions about these things, like, why don't we use this more? Like, here is this profound tool of making people better coordinated, better attuned at sensing what other folks are doing, how they're moving, how they're acting. It literally syncs us up with each other. It makes us feel closer. It increases our tolerance for pain. Like, why don't we take music so seriously as a powerful tool for actually making us better at all sorts of functions in society? Okay, here's a crazy series of questions. Why can't we play songs at the start of Zoom meetings that everyone in the call knows? Like, we're all on Zoom all the time now in the pandemic. Imagine if everyone was singing from their respective computer screens before a meeting starts. What if we could attune better to each other? What if we had a powerful tool to do that that was simple and accessible to everybody? I think we really underestimate this as a tool for the kinds of linking that we need to do and the kinds of healing that we're going to need to do after this pandemic. So I want to tell you a few stories, some from my personal life and work, and others from folks that I've had the pleasure of hearing tell me these stories. And the first story I want to tell you is from somebody that I really love and revere quite a lot. Her name is Bernice Johnson Regan, Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan. She is the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, and she was one of the freedom singers as part of the civil rights movement. And she tells a story about the song, This Little Light of Mine. Probably most of us know this song. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So she tells this story about how, this was a song that you didn't only sing in the civil rights movement when you were at a protest. Actually, the real purpose of that song was to sing it in the morning before you left your house. In that moment when you knew that maybe there might be trouble, that maybe you might be in a little bit of danger, maybe more than a little bit, by going to a protest for rights and for justice. And she said that the freedom singers and that people in the movement, they would sing that song as a way of connecting with their own light and casting the fear out, to let them actually take the step of walking out that door and showing up. And I didn't know that about that song. And when I think about what that means, I think about the power of individuals in their own homes singing a song, not just to connect them to a movement, but to connect them to their own strength and their own sense of purpose and their own sense of participation in a whole. I love that story. That's Bernice Johnson Regan's story. Sometimes after I tell that story, I kind of have to pause, because it feels like that story deserves like a cushion of space all around it to sort of sit and sink in and let people breathe into it. Thank you, Dr. Regan, wherever you are. We are sending you our love tonight. So I have these different sides of what I do, right? I'm a singer and a musician, and I write songs and I make music videos and I tour. And this is the side of what I do that's more like the music industry. Or I hate that word industry, really. It's like the music ecology. And then there's this side of my work that's much more about helping to think about the ways that music and the arts more broadly can let us ask questions about who we are and where we want to go and how we're going to get there collectively. So I want to briefly tell you the story of the Nile project, which was a project that came to the University of Washington in 2015. It's a project that I co-founded with an Egyptian ethnomusicologist by the name of Mina Girgis. And we brought musicians together from the 11 countries of the Nile to create music together and to model the kind of cross-cultural understanding that we wanted to see in the river. And I have to name the 11 countries of the Nile because most folks don't know the Nile River Basin. Going from south to north, DRC Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt. All those countries united by a river, by an ecology. And, you know, I wanted to tell the story of the very first performance of the Nile Project. And it was in a place called Aswan, which was the southernmost city in Egypt, which is the southernmost city in Egypt. And, you know, the people there were kind of used to development projects, you know, projects where like big international NGOs would come and like sort of share public health messages through theater, you know, things like that. And, you know, so it was definitely met with a kind of like, this is just another one of those projects. And I remember we were at a place called the Aswan Cultural Palace, and there was 18 of us, 18 musicians, and somehow 18 of us managed to put on a 2-hour show. And like, I realize that might sound like, oh yeah, a 2-hour show, that's kind of normal, but like 3 days before we had a 2-hour show, we had a 4-hour show. So there was a lot of cutting to do. And just think about what that was like. Actually, it was pretty peaceful, but the point is, we were coming from a place of wrestling with a really big concept, but trying to embody it also, not just on the stage, but with all of our actions with each other. And it was all love. Like, it was so much love. Like, we had built the show on this cultural center that was right on the banks of the Nile. And like every evening at sunset, we were all on the roof, you know, and it was just, it was like one of these moments in life where the light is somehow always golden. And anyway, so at the Aswan Cultural Palace, we had our debut show, and we were walking through the crowd, and we could see them with their arms crossed like this, you know. And it was like the difference between, and so from the beginning of the show to the end of the show, it was like the difference between like, show me what you can do and show me what you can do. Like, we, by the end of that show, that crowd would not let us go for 2 hours after the show, asking questions about all of our instruments, about where we came from, about how we learned music. And it was like a cracking open of possibility, like a real life experiment gone real beautifully. And the Nile has a lot of political tensions and social tensions. And so to do that from our very first concert was part of the reason that we were even able to turn it into a multi-year initiative that toured the world, including coming to the University of Washington. So, I mean, it's so funny because I can't see you all, but I did want to tell you that if you have questions for me, please, you know, you can put them in, you can email them to mayiask@uw.edu. Definitely feel free to do that. And also, um, Molly, if you want to just like write in that doc how much time I have left, I'm really like in a dream talking about all of this stuff with you because it's like my favorite thing to talk about. The power of music and the power of how music connects us. Um, and you know, the last thing want I wanted to make sure to tell you about is, um, you know, a new project that I have cooking. Um, and I feel so grateful to be commissioned by the Meany Center for the Performing Arts at the University of Washington for the live show of Movement, which is a podcast and live show telling stories of global migration through music. And so we started out really thinking about how we talk about migration. You know, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country as a refugee. And that was an experience that is a deep part of my music and my cultural work. And all throughout my career, I've collaborated with all kinds of cultural institutions that really uplift and center immigrant and refugee voices. And that's been something that's really, really important to me. So Movement, we just debuted on PRX's The World back in November, and we just also launched a call for immigrant artists to do a residency with us, to develop short audio pieces. So if you know immigrant musicians from the greater Seattle area whose stories and songs you feel like need a bigger platform, please, please, please send them our way. We would be happy to share the open call. We would love to get as many immigrant musicians from the Seattle area to be submitting their songs and stories to us as possible. But what we thought about when we were developing Movement is that we need different ways to talk about migration. You know, right now, when we talk about music and when we talk about migration, it tends to come to us as an issue, you know, an issue that is wrapped in all kinds of politicization instead of as a humanitarian question, instead of as the way that people have been on this earth for far longer than borders have existed. And so by centering culture, by centering the ways that immigrants are creating new culture every single day, by letting folks into a process where you can dance to those realities, you can hear them, you can sway your arms to them and shake your shoulders to them. We want to bring a whole new consciousness to the way folks interact with and intersect with immigrant musicians and artists and communities and culture bearers. And also there's a really strong note here for connecting immigrants together as well. Because like, for example, I've done, you know, in the work that I've done, I've really noticed how, you know, the African immigrant communities that I'm a deep part of don't have the kinds of relationships with the Latinx immigrant communities that are out there doing, you know, similar work on behalf of their own communities. And wouldn't it be powerful if we can share stories, share songs, and really understand how much we have in common with each other, and do it through the music that is so fundamental to who we are as people, as cultures. And then even more broadly, to think about what is it, you know, who is it that we mean when we say the word we, you know, as Americans. You know, we has so much more space to grow. We can be inclusive, we can be, and we at Movement really feel like music is an important part of making that bridge and connecting people to it in ways that are tangible and experienceable. I see a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to answer some of them. I'm going to read the questions to you so y'all know what is being asked. What are your recommendations for young adults who want to become musicians who make a cultural difference like this? Well, I'll say that, you know, the funny thing about this work is that I learned it by doing it. And And I really learned by finding people who were in my peer group who wanted to do the same thing and just trying something out together. First of all, I feel like young adults are the leaders. So y'all already know how to make anything happen. Like, I so firmly believe it. Like, the reason we are going to be okay on this planet, in this world, is because of young people. Like, young people are leading the way every single day. And um so I just want to say that, like, the power of young people is something that can't be ignored, shouldn't be ignored. um but what I really think is that there's a huge space for folks who want to think about the intersections of culture and well-being, culture and community power. Right now, there is a hunger for that. And so I would say, just start putting yourself out there, understanding, like, writing songs that resonate with the messages that you want to share, understanding that, online you can reach anybody anywhere. Y'all know this better than anyone. Um, but what I would really say is that, there's also all kinds of fellowships that you can apply to. And if you email may I ask at uw.edu, I would be, with your name, whoever it was that asked that question, I would be happy to follow up with some of those that I'm talking about, for cultural activism, for especially now in this time of the pandemic. People want music and culture that makes a difference. Like, there's a hunger for it that is just reaching a level that I haven't seen in previous years. So it's powerful times for this kind of work. How do you incorporate what you know about the neuropsychology of music into your daily life and or your music making process? That's a great question. Um, I think that the way that I incorporate it most is maybe by believing in it, which is to say that which is to say that when you, like, every time you walk on stage is an act of faith, you know, and it's standing in the belief that what you do has power, and it's worth it to bare your soul, to really go as deep into your own spirit as you can and just shine it bright. And every single time I stand on a stage or in front of folks, like, you have to reach a well of bravery every single time, every single time. And some of that neuroscience that I talked about actually helps me to do that, because it starts to say, hey, it ain't just you. It's not just you. It's actually one of these tools that we have, the way I talked about it being a powerful tool. Like, the feeling that you have of loving being on a stage, of loving being in an audience at a show, it's not just you. Like, this work has foundation. And so I use it as my own engine, which is not how I thought, and then how I thought it was going to be. But and then I also just think I use it to be tickled and delighted. Like, I love being delighted by learning. Like, I love learning. And so I find that this reading that I do about this subject is just, like, reaches a very deep need in me to continue to learn every single day. How do you envision being a cultural activist? Can you share other examples of your work as a cultural activist? Yes, so I talked about the Nile Project, bringing musicians together, and I talked about the Movement podcast, sharing stories of global migration and music as a way of shifting the landscape of the way we talk about the cultural power of immigrant communities. I'm also the chief of program at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, and we really focus at Yerba Buena, also known as YBCA. At YBCA, we focus on artists who support and make impact on the health and well-being of their communities. And so, literally, like, 9 to 5 every day. And this is a new thing. I just had my 1-year anniversary. I literally think about ways to support musicians and artists who are doing this work. And so it has become, it has moved from being cultural projects to literally being my entire day. So ways that we do that, we have an artist-led giving circle where we literally fundraised to a pool of $250,000 that we handed over to a cohort of BIPOC-led artists who are working on behalf of the health and well-being of their communities, and said, y'all are the experts on this. You do this every day. How do you want to spend this money? We literally think about how we shift power to BIPOC artists doing this work every single day. And that can be theater artists. You know, an example of a type of artist that's in this circle would be a gentleman by the name of Daryl Ratcliffe, who lives in Dallas, Texas, who transforms abandoned malls into spaces for artists and culture. You know, a woman by the name of Faye Daramawi, who's a co-founder of the SF Urban Film Fest, who brings storytelling and filmmaking into a process of interface with city planning and urban design as a way of inspiring participation in the decision-making of around neighborhoods and cities. And SFUF, the SF Urban Film Fest, is made up of like housing rights advocates and directors and screenwriters and storytellers and urban planners. And together they do this work. So those are, so I have my cultural projects, and then through my work at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, I also support the cultural projects and this particular way of thinking about art practice with many, 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 many other types of artists. Meklit, do you have tips for how to sing together over video calls? I lead a Girl Scout troop and we've been struggling with this, but as you say, it's so important to sing together. I do have a recommendation. And the reason that it's hard to sing together is because of latency. So Zoom has a really challenging latency for musicians because musicians need sound to be immediate. And, you know, we all understand what latency is because, you know, sometimes you have a call and you're talking with somebody and then you think that they've taken a pause, but really it was just the thing breaking up, and you start to talk and you're like, it gets very like start and stoppy, you know, so that's the latency problems make that really bad for musicians. So there's a free software called Jacktrip, and it's not the simplest software to set up. I will say that. So if there's a person in your troupe or in the kind of vicinity of your troupe who's a really good tech person, I would enlist their help. But it's a free software. It's created by Stanford University, and it's specifically so that people can sing together, play music together. And what it does is it decreases the latency to mimic standing about 30 feet away from someone. So with Jacktrip, if everybody has Jacktrip, you start to sound like you're in like one big room together. And so this is like how a lot of musicians are doing it. And it's an open source software. Anybody can download it for free. And I understand that they're Girl Scouts, so they're going to need a lot of help with something like that. But if you really want to sing together in a group situation from afar with no latency, there are free tools to do that are really, really amazing. What's the best way for municipal governments and community organizations such as libraries to provide support for musicians? Well, this is a great question. This is like a super, super, super great question. First of all, it's not just about musicians. Like, so now that question makes me like zoom out to the work that I do with artists as a whole. So, you know, the way that we think about it, you know, the way that we've really been thinking about it at YBCA is that there's what's called the vital conditions of community health and well-being. And there are things like, and meaning that if these conditions are met, people are healthier and communities are healthier. And there are things like community safety, social cohesion and belonging, the true narrative of the community, meaning how the community sees itself rather than how the community is seen from the outside, and civic muscle and civic participation. So you start to see that when you look at the vital conditions of community well-being, musicians and artists are really acting on those conditions of health and well-being. And so what you start to see when you sort of look at it with that framework is that it's really about inviting them into conversations. It's about being open to the kinds of creativity that they have. And that if we're really going to make change, if we're really going to galvanize large numbers of people to participate in the decisions and in the processes that will lead to change, musicians and artists can be a really key part of things like building community safety, building trust, bringing participation, and inspiring people to understand their own collective power and the importance of their collective power, specifically at a time like we are in right now, where we're so disparate, but actually what we need is more unity than ever. And the difficulty of that, just the fact that we're facing so much to get to a place of shared understandings. And the first thing I would say about that or is that understanding that musicians and artists have a role to play in municipal governments and community organizations is really huge. And then really I would say just being experimental enough to give it a try. And then also thinking about, where you can find some best practices around that. And if you email may I ask at uw.edu, I'd be happy to share some of that if there was a particular person who had a question around that. Oh my God, I didn't even see how many questions there were. Okay, what song or album have you been listening to or writing that has helped you get through quarantine? So many. First of all, there's a Cameroonian artist called Blick Bassey, Blick Bassey, and his last album was called 1958, and it's just like amazing, and I've just been listening to it nonstop lately. And I've also been listening. I listen a lot to my friends. I really believe in the power of musical community. In fact, Brian Eno has this concept called scenius. So scenius is the idea that when you start to see people emerge from a scene, like whether that's around a pop kind of context or whether that's around like you start to see a big musical idea emerge from a scene, it's not about genius, so it's not about an individual, but it's about scenius. It's the intelligence of the scene. So in that way, I listen to a lot of people who are part of my same musical community. So that's folks like Fantastic Negrito, who's a wonderful artist based in Oakland. He was the winner of the first Tiny Desk contest, and we're part of the same musical community. Folks like Kev Choice in Oakland, and Inspector Gajay Balkan Brass Band. There's just so many, but I also feel like, sometimes we have this feeling like, local music and, national touring music is they kind of don't occupy the same space, but I'm just such a big believer in like understanding who the musicians are and the culture makers are right around you. And, KEXP is like great for that because they do support Seattle music. And I've been very grateful to know many DJs over there who do such good work, like Gabriel Teodros and his show Early, which is just an incredible show. Let's see. How much time do we have left? I'm feeling like it's time to play another song. I'm going to play another song, and then if you all have any more questions, you can feel free to ask. I felt like I should perform a song in Amharic because I know my mom is watching. Hi, Mom. Apai mado fila sari yallo bare amana kabare. Apai mado fila sari yallo bare amana kabare. Obarani yale, but which for harder. Wegamon makabi, 밤을 터지를 던끄럽 bemissraat lager betsugna gabarani mi bild katomen alena arikyo de mamun areo de mamun arikyo de mamun areo de mamun maratona vivo limlim nomina yo ya gabarati kam yasrawtet no ya gabarati kam yasrawtet no abay mado filo sari yallo bere anana kabere abay mado filo sari yallo bere anana kabere Meratun apibo limlimum ninayo يجبرتي كأم يسرع وتتنو عتكل في رفري عكف رفري يجر ألينتا أنا شو جبري عريو دمامون عريو دمامون عريو دمامون عريو دمامون يسكا يكبه يماريو تاتو عكرابيو جبري هلون بيعنتو عكرابيو جبري هلون بيعنتو أباي مادو فيلا وساري يالو بري أنا كبري So we have time for one last question after the song. We've come to the end of our time together. It went fast. But while the music is still going, I just want to say that I wish each of you wellness, connection, songs, beauty, I wish all good things for you. And I thank you for spending these minutes. I was going to say hours, but it hasn't been hours yet. For spending this time with me. Last question. How did I discover my passion for music? Well, I was talking to my mom about this the other day. And I was telling her that I think that being a musician is about if the music is inside of you. And then the work is matching your skills to the inner drive, you know? But even when I was 2 years old, 3 years old, I would stop people on the buses and in the elevator and ask them if they wanted to hear a song. So I've got to say there was probably a desire to perform from a very young age. And I feel so grateful to be able to perform for people. As I do not take it for granted, not for one day, not for 1 second, not one day do I take that for granted. And I'm so grateful for each of you. The Movement Live show will be coming to the University of Washington next season. So please stay in touch. I would love to stay connected with you all, and we'll be, doing a lot on campus virtually, and soon we hope in person over the next year. So I will see you soon. Thank you so much to all the folks who made this dance lecture series possible. I really appreciate you inviting me and having me as part of it. Be well, y'all.